Hello and welcome to our What Makes a Thriller interview for the Turn the Page podcast. I'm Kay, your host, and today I'm joined by two fantastic YA thriller mystery authors. Kathryn Foxfield is here. Kathryn's pronouns are she, they. Kathryn is the author of Good Girls Die Young, which was the best-selling UK YA debut of 2020. It's Behind You, and her latest release, Tag You're Dead, which was released in July. We're also joined by Maya MacGregor. Maya's pronouns are they, them. Maya is a writer, singer, and artist based in Glasgow, Scotland. Maya's debut novel, The Many Half-Lived Lives of Sam Sylvester, is a gripping murder mystery told by Sam, a non-binary autistic teen. Okay, so before we launch into our interview topic today, which is what makes a thriller, could you tell us a little bit more about your latest book? So Kathryn, could we start with you? Could you tell us a little bit about Tag You're Dead?
Here it is. Yes, so my last book came out, I think a couple of weeks ago now, and it's about a live-streamed game of tag that's set in an augmented reality London, in which three of the characters aren't exactly who they say they are, and they're there for reasons other than the prize. Then as nightfall, someone or maybe something hacks into the contestants' AR augmented reality glasses and reveals that someone involved in the game is a murderer.
Oh, brilliant. So very sort of futuristic, full of technology and AI, but with a YA cast, I believe. Is that right?
Yes, so it's all teenagers, lots of horrible teenagers killing each other. I think that's kind of my brand when it comes to books.
Brilliant. And Maya, could you tell us a little bit about The Many Half-Lived Lives of Sam Sylvester, please?
Yeah, so this book it came out in May in the US, but it will be, the hardcover release will be on, I think, the 7th of August. We've been waiting on freight. Like everyone knows right now that like logistics has just been a nightmare for everything. Yeah. And this is about a queer autistic non-binary teen who survived a hate crime in Montana and ends up with their dad moving to Oregon, to a small seaside town, to sort of start fresh after that. And they move into a house where a boy died 30 years before, and there's also some elements of spooky things start to happen, where Sam's bedroom is actually the room where he died. And so Sam, with the help of some lovely new friends, starts to try and solve this 30-year-old mystery. And yeah, it's gotten such lovely responses from people that I'm really chuffed to bring it to where I live.
They're both fantastic, and I can't wait till more people can read your book, Maya, and obviously everyone's already reading yours, Kathryn, as well, because it's been out a few weeks. So I think we can agree that sort of they both have thriller mystery elements in them, which is why our interview is called What Makes a Thriller. So what drew you to the sort of thriller mystery genre? We'll start with you, Kathryn, if that's okay.
So, I mean, when I read books, I love books that can surprise me, and I love puzzles. So I kind of tried to write the sort of book that I would want to read. And I find that with thrillers and horror as well, because all my books have elements of horror, I feel like anything's possible, and you're not confined by the limits of the real world. So you can put your characters in these really awful situations and find out what they're really made of. And I think one of the big themes of all my books is, who are we really on the inside? And there's nothing quite like fear to really bring out who a person really is. And
yeah, very true. Yeah, that's fantastic. Maya?
So I sort of came at this one sideways. I am generally a fantasy writer, and Sam sort of popped into my head 6 years ago as this character who I just wanted to know more of. And sorry, I have a moth problem. And
I have a fly buzzing around also. It's the heat.
I feel like, sorry, half the time I'm just running around like killing moths in this flat because they're impossible to get rid of. But yeah, so Sam sort of took hold of me, and I really wanted to write the sort of book that I wish I'd had as a teen. I didn't have any sort of non-binary rep, very lit. I think the only queer book I remember hearing about as a kid was Heather Has Two Mummies, and it was a banned book. So that conveys lots of things. And the mystery element for me, sort of came in with grappling with the sort of messages that particularly trans and queer people are getting hugely right now, that we don't deserve to be part of society, that we are wrong, that we shouldn't get to even pee in a public place if we need to, like all of these different things that are quite heavy. And I think that the central tenet of this book was exploring what it means to own the fact that you deserve to live, that you deserve to exist, that you deserve to fight for this existence that you have and the life that you have, through the lens of solving a 30-year-old mystery of this boy who died way too early. And I really, really loved the sort of juxtaposition of that, of getting to Sam, like to a point where they can claim their own life and their own space on this planet through something that was a bit spooky and scary, and required them to actually step up and fight for their own life. So
yeah, that's beautiful, and I think that really comes across. And what I love is that sort of your Sam's story sort of goes back in time, like you said, a 30-year-old murder mystery, but then yours, Kathryn, is sort of futuristic, and they have similar sort of, you know, the thriller mystery themes, and they're both YA, and they both have current topics in them, but I love that they both sort of veer in these different sort of timeline directions. I think that's really, really cool. That really works really well. So how easy or difficult did you find it to sort of create that tension that we associate with thrillers and mysteries, whilst working in those other themes? So again, Kathryn, could we go with you first, please?
Yes, so with the tension in my books, I tend to build it up over multiple rounds of rewriting and editing. So I'll sort of write the first draft, which just doesn't make any sense, and then gradually go through and look at every scene and say, how can I make this more tense or more scary or more impactful? And I mean, I had a scene in Tag You're Dead where I think I had the characters all arguing in a little cafe over some nice cups of tea. And I was a bit like, well, why have them somewhere nice and safe when I can put them in a deserted building yard and have all of these kind of AR monsters coming at them from every direction? And it's kind of just asking yourself, what would make this situation even worse for the characters? And then rewriting it and making it horrible.
That's brilliant, and slightly sadistic, but I think it works.
They're not real people, it's fine.
Fantastic. Maya, what about you?
Sort of similarly, I write the first draft or something, and then I tend to write really bare bones, and I think that is very evident in this book, because the initial draft was 75,000 words and it ended up being 100. Oh, so I tend to write, I just need to get the story out, like I need to get it and see it, tell it to myself, so I know what shape I'm sort of working with. And also with this one, it started out actually where Sam's half-lived lives were actually literal past lives. So things that Sam themselves had experienced over multiple lifetimes. And we got a revise and resubmit from a very large publisher in the US that suggested removing the paranormal element. So I did. And then when it sold, my editor actually wanted to bring that back in. So a lot of the process of upping the tension and sort of threading through those mysterious elements was really interesting, sort of back and forth between, okay, we're going to take this out, but we're going to go in a different direction, we're going to put it back. And a lot of that sort of came through that paranormal element of Sam connecting with Billy Clement and experiencing sort of Billy's feelings and Billy's own need for closure and to be heard throughout the story. And you sort of see, as like Sam and other people sort of communicate with Billy in different tiny wee ways that are very subtle, like subtly threaded through, that a lot of that played into that sort of build up. And I like, it was a really interesting process for me, because it's always like, I always feel like I don't know what I'm doing, and then I go back into drafts and I'm like, this actually works. I just do this one thing and then this will fit. Sorry, my cat is scratching at my luggage. Tara.
No, that's all great. So what do you feel is the most challenging aspect then of writing a thriller mystery that also sort of ties in a contemporary way and has these sort of real themes coming through? And we'll go back to Kathryn.
I find kind of one of the hardest things about writing is not trying to throw too much into a book, I suppose, because I want to keep the reader guessing and surprise people with some twists and turns. But then every now and again, I'll read a book with a kind of simple premise that is just so beautiful and that gets into the heads of these characters. Like I just finished reading Emily Barr's Ghosted, which I think's out fairly soon. And it's amazing. It's got this kind of really interesting idea behind it, but then she really gets into the characters, and there's a few characters, but you get to know them so well. And I find it very difficult to write books that stick to one idea and develop it. I tend to just throw so much in trying to make it surprising and fun. So I would say that's the hardest bit for me, is making sure I can have a mystery which people aren't going to guess on the first page, but then not complicate it so much that everyone's like, oh, for goodness sake, I'm not going to finish reading this. And I think with every book I write, I get a bit better at this. So it's a constant balancing act, I suppose, isn't it? To be fun, but not out there.
Yeah, and that's a great formula as well, to have just enough twists to keep everyone going, but not make it overly confusing. There are a few books where it's like, it's too much.
I look back on the first books I wrote when I was sort of a beginning writer, and they're like 5 books in one, because I didn't really know where they were going, and I'll just sit and write, and then I'll be like, oh, this is a great idea. Why don't I also have spaceships? What am I trying to do with this book? So yeah, it's the one idea, Kathryn.
Brilliant. What about you, Maya? What do you find the most challenging aspect?
I think sometimes it's like when I'm writing the first draft, I'm really, like I said, I'm telling the story to myself, but in subsequent drafts, particularly when you're working with an editor, you're getting beta reader feedback or sensitivity reader feedback. It's the sort of push and pull of making sure that what I have communicated on the page is what other people are receiving. And I think that can be a difficult process sometimes. And I had a lot of anxiety about this with Sam, just because Sam is autistic, I am autistic, and like I know very well that many times throughout my life, people look at my reactions or they look at my existence and they are very either puzzled by it or put off by it. And so I was a bit afraid that if I communicated Sam through my own experience of autism, that people wouldn't connect with them. And so there was a bit of push and pull, where there were a couple of times when people would come back with feedback that were like, wouldn't it be better if Sam did this? And I'm like, Sam wouldn't do that. So it's sort of like, I think that was difficult for me, and in terms of just anxiety levels, but in terms of craft levels for me, I think I sort of struggle to flesh things out, because I'm like, in my mind it's clear, so sometimes I need to like go back and really like workshop something to get to the point where what I'm wanting on the page is actually communicated articulately. So
yeah, and I think it's great that you sort of worked really hard to keep Sam authentic as well, and I think that really shines through, and it is lovely to see that in there. And it kind of segues into our next question, which is sort of how the real world sort of inspires and impacts your story. So obviously you've drawn from your own personal experiences, your own personal identity, to sort of write Sam and how Sam is. Is there anything else that was a big part of the real world that you put in there?
Yeah, there definitely was. So so I grew up with 2 mums, bouncing all over the United States, and we, like, for several years were in rural Montana, and I was there when Matthew Shepard was murdered in 1998, and it was a really, really brutal hate crime. Like and I remember being at school, and Sam mentions this in the book, this is something I actually put into the book, but we played a game in PE literally called Smear the Queer. And everyone called it, including the teachers. And that was like, that sends a really visceral message to closeted kids, to kids in queer families, that like, that's what we can expect from the world. So that is definitely something that I was working through, almost my own sort of trauma of growing up in such an intensely homophobic environment. Like with Sam sort of recovering from their own trauma of experiencing a hate crime that very nearly ended up in their death. So I think that this is definitely one of the most personal books that I think I've ever written. And it was important for me to do that, because I think like the core message, as I mentioned, is that like, we do deserve to be here. We don't deserve to be treated that way. We don't deserve to live in a world where people are, calling games Smear the Queer. Like we do not, that's not how things should be. So I wanted to envision something more hopeful and more optimistic, where Sam gets a place to shine. So yeah, that it was definitely really heavily impacted by the real world for me.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful message to ring through as well, and I think that's going to make such an impact for a lot of people. Kathryn, what about you? So what sort of real world inspirations impacted your story?
I mean, I'm not sure I can follow that answer with something as beautiful and meaningful. I think that COVID changed my writing a lot, actually, and
Okay.
I've sort of gone the way of all my books being escapism and a bit of fun to try and get away from the real world, I suppose. And I'd love to be able to write the sort of meaningful books that draw from my personal experience, but I'm not sure I'm there in my career at the moment. So I think my books tend to be inspired by a real world place that sort of grounds them a bit in the real world. So, for example, Tag is set in London, and I love London. I lived there for years, and sort of, I think I left my heart behind there when I moved out into the middle of the countryside. And but when it comes to the story itself, it tends to be a bit out there and a bit, so you've always got that safety net when you're reading, where you're thinking this wouldn't happen in the real world. Bit of fun. And I do put some real things in there that I think maybe teenage readers could identify with. For example, Tag Your Dead has sort of references to toxic masculinity and toxic relationships. And I'm kind of trying to strike a balance between making my books relatable and sort of having some positive messages, but then also just trying to write something that's fun and a bit silly. And I mean, I think there's a place for both types of books in the world, I hope. I mean, I like reading both types, but
yeah, absolutely.
When it comes to writing, I'm going for the silly ones.
Absolutely.
Oh, sorry. I just can like piggyback on that just a wee bit. Like, COVID has definitely changed how I approach my writing, and I think like a lot of the things I wrote Sam and I finished it in 2017, so it's now been 5 years. So that's a long time. And like a lot of the stuff that I've been writing in the last couple of years have been a lot more lighthearted. It has been a lot more escapey, because I think so many of us need that right now. We look outside. I was just saying yesterday on Twitter, like, I wish that we could get rid of that "what's happening" panel on Twitter, because it's just like all four horsemen of the apocalypse just staring at you, like constantly, like there's war and famine and pestilence, and aren't you excited to be in this wonderful and interesting time? It's like, yeah, here.
I've heard people say, oh, are you going to put mentions of COVID in your book, like have the characters sort of reference back to it? And I'm a bit like, I just want to pretend it didn't happen when it comes to reading. I think there's been a lot of media that's come out that's sort of dealt with all of the horrors of the last few years. And we also need media that lets us kind of take a step back from it, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. I'm definitely an escapist reader. I'd love to avoid the real world at all costs. That's brilliant. So could you sort of, just a quick segue, could you recommend 3 thriller and mystery books by other authors for our listeners? Whichever of you wants to go first.
I can, yeah. So I recently read The Agathas by Kathleen Glasgow and Lisa Lawson. I'm trying to read them so I don't get confused. I'm so bad at remembering who wrote books. Yeah, so The Agathas is this really good mystery, and yeah, I loved it. Queen of the Tiles by Hannah Alcaff, which I read last year, which is just brilliant. It's set at like a Scrabble convention, and it's just so much fun. I mean, it's quite dark and meaningful as well, but it's the premise is brilliant. And I recently read The King is Dead by Benjamin Dean, which is kind of a reimagined British monarchy in which the new king is a 17-year-old black boy. So it's dealing with issues of racism, but then there's this whole thriller mystery, someone's trying to kill him maybe vibe going on. And yeah, it's brilliant.
Yeah, I read that as well. That kept me on the edge of my seat. It was fantastic. Maya, what about you?
So I've got a few, and they're all quite different to each other. So one of them was a few years ago, actually, and it's The Mystery of Hollow Places by Rebecca Podos. And it's it was just a really beautiful sort of mystery of, you know, finding someone who's lost, but also, you know, discovering yourself, and like love and loss and identity. It has a lot of different things that are all sort of pulled into that. It's been a few years, so I don't think I can really summarize the plot very well. But more recently, I just finished I Kissed Shara Wheeler, which is a rom-com, but it's also a bit of a mystery, and is really playful and fun. And I liked that aspect of sort of the central mystery being A, where is she, and B, like, what is she doing? Like, what is happening here? Like, trying to like pull apart the threads in this young woman's mind. And then I've been reading some more like gothic, like thriller-esque things. So one that I've like absolutely adored was Pine. It's by Francine Toon, I think, and it's a Scottish gothic. It's set in rural Scotland, and it's just gorgeously written. It's got a lot of sort of women in white vibes to it. So like a thread of paranormal, as well as just being dark and haunting and really fun. So the like, and then the other one that I read was, so this is 4, sorry, Caitlin Starling, The Death of Jane Lawrence, which was just so creepy and visceral and really beautifully done as well. And I love a gothic, so I love when, like, I just love the element of horror that threads through them, as well as the unraveling of whatever is going on. So
yeah, I'm going to add all of those to my TBR as soon as we're off this, because they all sound really good. So just jumping back to your books now, obviously, Kathryn, yours is sort of a cast of a group of characters. Was there one in particular who you enjoyed writing the most, and why?
I really enjoy writing all of my characters. I think I especially like the ones who are treading that fine line between good people and really awful people. And when you've got people who are either good at heart but doing terrible things for all the right reasons, or the ones who are just pretending to be lovely on the surface but deep down they're just awful. I really enjoyed a character in Tag called Charlotte, which I think she divides people reading the book, or maybe just everyone hates her. I'm not sure, but I loved her because she's quite like me, and she's sort of got this really obsessive inner world where she's just kind of makes up all of these stories and invents things in her head, and it blurs the line between what's real and actually something that she's just made up and forgotten that it's come out of her head. And yeah, I just really enjoyed writing her, even though she isn't always the nicest of people.
Yeah, I think you often have fun with the bad ones. So Maya, obviously Sam is your main character. So aside from Sam, do you have sort of a character who you found the most enjoyable to write, or I suppose even the most challenging?
I really, really loved writing Aidan. Aidan is one of these characters who, like, when you first meet him, he's a little bit clumsy with how he approaches Sam and how he sort of responds to things. But immediately when he's challenged on it, he responds to that in a way that's curious rather than like defensive or aggressive. And I think, you know, like a lot of queer communities have this ongoing joke that we sort of clump even before we're out. And like, that's true. I went to like an evangelical university in the States, and it was really funny that like 10 years later, almost my entire friend group is queer. So like the people who I hung out with then, we were all deeply, deeply closeted at the time. But we tend to find each other, and that's sort of true of, you know, divergent people as well. So with Aidan, I sort of wanted to show his sort of gravitation towards this group of queer kids without really him really questioning it too much, but also I really liked the fact that he felt seen by them and he felt like he could fit in with them, because I think that was just, it was a really fun and lovely dynamic to write. And then also I did have fun writing Blaze, because she's the typical bully. Like, she is just absolutely, she's the person you love to hate, who hurts people just because she can. And it's like, it's sort of fun to write that, because you get to just absolutely turn around and smack them down, because it's just like sort of cathartic to write the characters and know they're going to get their comeuppance. So
yeah, that's brilliant. So just going back to, and found family is a big theme in your book. Are there any other sort of, I don't want to use the word tropes exactly, but you know what I mean, any of those kind of elements that you like to put into your writing?
Oh, I love certain tropes. Like I really like I didn't do this in Sam, but like I love a fated romance. Like I absolutely love the soulmates trope so much. But also I really love friends to lovers, and I think that that's something that is in Sam, where you get like Sam and Shep's friendship that turns romantic, and Sam's demisexual, so I think friends to lovers fits really well with a spectrum people. But I have a lot of fun with those, and also just choosing your family as a trope. Like Junius Sylvester is Sam's dad. Like he also chose Sam, and our parents always choose us, whether they adopt us or give birth to us. It's always a choice to be a parent and to be a good one. But I really, really loved writing just a very healthy parent-child relationship, because that was definitely wish fulfillment. Like I didn't have that, so I really wanted to show something like that, and I'm still obsessed with Junior Sylvester.
What about you, Kathryn? Any tropes or those kinds of themes that you like to incorporate in your books?
I was thinking the other day actually that all of my books seem to kind of have a hidden theme, I guess, of characters who are really struggling with feeling like other people are trying to fit them in a box that they just know they don't fit in. And I mean, this happens in lots of different ways in all my books, and I don't think it's always obvious to the reader, but when I look at it, I'm like, all of these characters are kind of pretending to be someone they're not, because that's who they think the world wants them to be. And then usually by the end, if they survive, they've kind of come to the realization that they're only going to be happy if they are themselves, and that they have to stop listening to what everyone else wants and just kind of just be who they need to be. And yeah, I keep coming back to it, and I never mean to, but every one of my books has these people who are a bit confused with what they want to be in the world, and sort of torn between what other people want for them and what they truly want inside.
Yeah, and they I love the messages in both books. I absolutely think they're lovely. That was a big ginger cattail.
Tara, she's here to visit.
Oh, she's beautiful.
Up in the window because Willow likes to steal it. And last night Willow broke her food bowl. So she was trying to steal Tara's food, knocked it down from where I had it, and shattered the bowl. So I was like, good. One of them would make an appearance. But,
well, this has been such a great interview, and I just sort of want to finish on a really fun note. So if you suddenly found yourself transported into the world of your latest book, what's the very first thing that you would do? Maya, we'll start with you.
Oh God, I think I would love to go have coffee with Junior Sylvester. Like I would absolutely love it. Like I think that he's this character who sort of surprised me. Like I knew I wanted to write a healthy relationship for Sam, to have that, you know, sort of solid foundation, but also just he's fun, and he's like excited about life, even if he's scared sometimes, and he just has this like energy of hope and willingness to work at things. And I think it would just be really fun to either like just go for a stroll on the beach or go get some coffee and just hang out with Junior Sylvester and see what's going on in his mind. I'd also love to hang out with the kids, but I'm 37 now, so I'm not sure I could fit in very well with them. So
it's your book, you're allowed to do whatever you want.
It's true.
What about you, Kathryn? What would you do?
I mean, I've always joked that I wouldn't last 5 minutes in any of my own books, because I'm just a massive coward and easily scared. And also I'm really sensible. I think part of my books is a bit of wish fulfillment of all these people who go out and have these big adventures. And I just would not. And so I think if I ended up in one of my books, I would either be sensible and make a quick retreat, or I think there's a few characters I'd like to just sit down with and just give them a bit of a talking to and say, look, therapy is a lot safer than what you're about to do, and just come on, you just need a hug. Please don't do this.
Just step in there. You've created the problems as the author.
Yeah.
But just step in there and be like, there's another way.
Make better choices.
I know, do the book if they did, but yeah, in real life, if they were real people, I think I'd feel very sorry for them, because they go through a lot.
Yeah.
There was a meme going around this week that was sort of about that. It was just like talking about fanfic writers, and it was like, I'm going to get you so laid, or I'm going to torture you emotionally, or I'm going to create an alternate universe where you get so much therapy. And it's just like, yes, we can leave that to the readers.
I have a little file on my computer called What They Did Next or something like that. And I kind of write alternative universe endings for my characters.
Oh, that's brilliant.
I always feel I leave them in a really terrible state usually at the end of my books, because I feel like I can't wrap it up neatly after they've been through so much. It would just feel contrived. So I kind of write these little, she went off to America and she got married and had like cats and lived happily.
Oh, that's lovely. Do you ever release those sort of for your readers just as little sort of treats?
I mean, it's terrible, I think. But I think if someone specifically asked me in person, oh, what happened to that character, I'll tell them.
Yeah, you have it prepared.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So what's coming up next for you both? Sort of what's in the pipeline? Shall we start with you, Kathryn?
So I'm writing another YA thriller, which should hopefully come out next summer. I'm just kind of trying to finish the draft of that. So I have quite a quick turnaround with books. So I sort of hand them in October and then they're published the following July.
Oh, wow, that is quick.
Yeah, it is quite quick. And then I'm hoping to write for other audiences at some point. I'm going to stick to horror, but I'd love to write for younger kids, but we will see what happens.
Brilliant. And can you give us any sort of just a sneak idea of what the book's about that you're writing at the moment, or is it too soon?
I wish I knew. I just keep changing my mind as I write it. So it's a similar sort of vibe to the others in that it's kind of like some weird, spooky happenings behind the scenes, but it's mostly focused on a group of teenagers who are kind of backstabbing, obsessed with their own futures and trying to kind of win at any cost. Yeah.
Brilliant. Sounds fantastic. What about you, Maya?
So my publisher's actually picked up my option book, which is called The Evolving Truth of Ever Stronger Will, and I wrote that in 2018. Publishing is slow. I'm really, really excited for that. So we're in the editorial process on that just now with a 2024 release date, it's looking like. But that one is about another like neurodivergent, non-binary teen on the other side of the country who is trying to find their foster mum who wanted to adopt them, but then they were reunited with their terrible biological mum. So it's still a bit of a paranormal aspect to it. There's definitely ghosts and skeletons in the closet. But it's also got similar themes of like queer people finding each other and those sort of found families and a lot of that sort of optimism. And it's written in second person, which I'm really excited about. And that's something that like I wasn't sure how it was going to go over, but like my editor absolutely loved it. So I'm like excited.
Brilliant. Yeah, they both sound fantastic. I can't wait to read those. But thank you so much to both of you for coming on today and chatting with us about your books. They're both brilliant. And so everybody, if you don't know already, you can buy both The Many Half-Lived Lives of Sam Sylvester. That will be out in August, so you'll be able to get that everywhere in the UK. It's already out in the US. Tag Your Dead is available everywhere right now. So thank you both so much. I really look forward to what's coming next. And I hope you both have a great rest of the day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.